Blog Talk Radio.
Live from the nation's capital, it's quintessential listening, poetry, with host Dr. Michael Anthony Ingram.
Quintessential Listening Poetry. Tonight's episode is very, very special. Tonight we remember the life and poetic legacy of Clif Collins. Clif was a beloved English professor at Montgomery College, Rockville, Maryland. He taught at the college for 25 years and was widely known for his work with students. In 2017, he published his first book, Lives of the Apostles. The book encompasses themes of grief, loss, betrayal, coming of age, endurance, and love in its various forms. Further, it examines the momentary circumstances of everyday people as they try to connect with life in the modern age. Friends and colleagues of Clif are with me tonight to salute his poetic legacy by reading from his book, Lives of the Apostles. I'd like to introduce my guest, Amy Brennan.
Hello.
Hello, Amy. Dr. Swift
Yes,
Dickinson.
hello.
Hello, Dr. Swift Dickinson.
Yes, thanks for having me on. Hello.
All right. Dr. Miller Newman.
Hi. Good evening, everyone.
Right. Good evening. And Dr. Marianne Silk.
Hi, good evening.
All right, thank you. You know, I did not know Clif. But after reading about him, I was thoroughly impressed by his breadth of outreach to others. He was a real people person. I read comment after comment after comment about his life and the way that he treated others. He cared about humanity. Dr. Newman, what are some of your thoughts or reflections about working with Clif?
I think that the most telling thing about Clif is a story of his desire to educate, or not even, maybe educate is too sophisticated a word. He really wanted people to understand the power of language. And so he tackled this. And this is a young man who grew up in a small town in Georgia who has committed to coming up to the East Coast in Maryland in the DMV. And the first job he did after he got to the college was go teach in the juvenile detention centers in Montgomery County, because he said he was convinced that these young people were in prison because they could not read. So that was the man that I shared an office with, a career with, and many a laugh with over the years. Clif and I started at MC together, and we actually ended our careers at MC together. But any of his students, people who have worked with him, will tell you that what you hear in his poetry is what you saw every single day. He was extremely consistent in being consistent. So that's the Clif Collins that I had the pleasure of working with for 25 years.
All right. Consistent in terms of being consistent. That's a very powerful statement. Swift.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Any comments?
Yes, well, as I was mentioning, Clif did hire me. He was in the search committee that got me to Montgomery College in 2001. and he seemed very supportive of me. The connection we shared initially was over music and folk music and blues and such, and I really admired what he knew about it and his enthusiasm for it, and also Caribbean literature, which I did some work in, and he was aware of some of the authors whom I studied. So, and just getting a positive sense, as Miller may have said, he's a straightforward person in many respects, but his humor would often come through, and he would, explode any sense of pretension that many of us might, put out there. So that was great, and just very genuine, person, and it's not necessarily rare to have a model of that kind for students, but it certainly is tremendous advantage for students to get a human being who will be passionate about education, but also down to earth and of I don't know if particularly humble beginnings, but certainly well grounded, and he was really a pleasure to be around. So,
Marianne.
I think.
Oh, go ahead, Miller.
No, go ahead, Marianne, please.
Actually, even though Cliff and I were in the same department, I would have to say that I know him more through his poetry. Sad to say, that around the time his book came out, my friend Joanna Howard, who's also in the department, said, "Oh, you've got to read this. You've got to read this." So I bought it and I fell in love with the book. It's just an amazing book of poems, and I think I wanted to share it with the wider world. So I thought that your show, Michael, would be an excellent opportunity.
Amy.
I agree.
Miller, did you want to finish?
No, I was just thinking that Cliff has to be sitting somewhere listening to this and just having the greatest time, because as a writer, to have other writers say this is what they'd like to spend an evening doing, reading your writing and commenting on it. Yes, Cliff would appreciate this very much. So thank you very, very much for hosting us this evening.
Oh, no problem. Amy.
Yes, well, Cliff's family and my family are close personal friends, and I will tell you that in Cliff's private life, Cliff was the life of every party. He was the largest personality in any room, and he just brought a good time and happiness and joy everywhere he went. It was impossible to be with Cliff and not laugh. He really lived life to the fullest, and so some of the poems, obviously, they're not all fun and laughter. They really take a serious look at life, but some of them are very funny. And at some point this evening, I'll share with you some of what Cliff told me about how he structured the book and the themes of the book and what he called the different movements of the book.
Right. Thank you all. His book, and we plan to recite poems from his book, share poems from his book, The Lives of the Apostles, received rave reviews. It's available on Amazon.com. After reading the book, I was most impressed by the different themes and the 18 movements. So, Amy, as you just shared, please share again your knowledge of the book's construction.
Okay, well, when I read the book, there are three overarching themes. One is called The Lost Prophet, one is called The Horn Player's Verse, and the third is called The Winter Plains. So those are the three overarching themes. But then there are 18 movements. And when I saw this, I asked Cliff whether there was any special significance to the way he structured the book and the 18 movements. And for each of the three themes, the Lost Prophet, the Horn Player's Verse, and the Winter Plains, there are 18 poems in each. So this is what Cliff told me about that. He said that he sort of looked at his life in 3 stages. He looked at his life up to age 18, up to age 36, and up to age 54, which gets us the 3 sets of 18 movements. And what he said to me was that when he was a younger person, up to the time he was about 18, in his young adult life, he really got to a point where he felt he had to make adult decisions, and he became an independent person. And as I believe it was Miller mentioned earlier, he moved from the South to the city of Baltimore. And he talked about how the first part of the book is really about that youth and coming of age. And he told me that the second part of the book, he stated that around the age of 36, he experienced a life-changing event. And he didn't really give me the details of that, but I couldn't help but speculate and think that maybe he had even had something like a near-death experience, because he said from that point on, from about age 36 on, he said that he didn't fear death, and he basically said that he knew at that point in his life that whatever awaits us after this life is good. And then the final 18 years, he said he focused mainly the end of that when he was about 54 years old. He said that's when he really started focusing on putting the poems together, putting the book together. But that was also when he was diagnosed with his illness, or I should say the illness was really beginning to take its toll. And so those are basically sort of how he came up with the 3 themes and the movements. But the interesting thing and the fun part of the book, I would suggest for anyone who has the book, he told me that each of the movements, the poems in the 3 sections go together. So if you look at any of the movements and you read the 3 poems from each of the 3 sections of the book, they go together. So for example, there's a movement called Spoke as a Child, and that's sort of the second poem in each of the 3 parts of the book, and they all complement each other. So it's just a different way of looking at the poems and looking at how Clif lived his life and selected poems that maybe he thought reflected the maturity of the years and of his own life as the years went by. So I wish now that I had spoken to him more about it and asked him more questions, but that's the best I can do explaining what he told me about how he structured the book.
All right. Thank you. Comments from Miller or Marianne or Swift about the construction of the book?
Well, I was going to ask anybody who knew anything about the cover. I'm just very curious about that cover, because I assumed there was something significant about the photograph of older gentlemen looking at some cows who are kind of, I guess eating out in the pasture somewhere. And I didn't see any information on the cover. Maybe I misread or something, but I was just curious about that cover.
Yes, I can answer that for you. You didn't misread anything. That is Clif's grandfather.
Okay, great.
And there is one poem in here, and I will try to, as we're going in the reading, I'll try to identify which of the poems it is by name. But one of the poems is about the passing of Clif's grandfather when Clif was a child. And the poem talks about basically community gathering and some of the community members trying to comfort Clif and how he was feeling as a child when his grandfather died. So
I remember that one.
There's actually a poem that relates to the gentleman.
Question.
There you go.
That's
yes, thank you.
Question,
oh, well
1968, no problem.
Excellent.
Yeah, that was one of my favorite ones. Especially from the memorial service when I heard you read it, Miller.
Thank you.
I'd like to share those 18 movements so that the audience have an opportunity to think about them. Hunger, Spoke as a Child, Desert Voices, Laughter in the Next Room, Lost Prophets, Ashes, Given Sight, Having Looked Upon the Dead, Deception, The Walls, Exiles, Whose Name is in the Language, A Different Season, Wandering Spring, History Answers, Following a Life, Elegies, and the Spoken Word. All powerful within themselves. Well, everyone, we're going to take a brief break here. We'll be right back, and we'll be back with the reading. My name is Michael Anthony Ingram, and welcome to Quintessential Listening Poetry. I'm here with my very special guests, Amy Brennan, Dr. Miller Newman, Dr. Swift Dickerson, Dr. Marianne Silk, and tonight we'll read from Clif Collins' book, Lives of the Apostles. Marianne, be the first reader.
Okay. I thought I'd start with separating. Okay. All the way down Kings Mountain, we coasted, cheating the gas man, teasing the brakes just enough to hold the road while you stared out of your separate quiet at the trees sliding past, and the baby laughed in the back seat, waving at birds as yet tucked away from the self-deception, betrayal, lies, eating away at 3 lives now, the wind in my ear whispering secret epiphanies about reaping fruit, and the bed you lie in until I heard the strange broken truth of my own voice. I cannot believe in you anymore. Okay. Okay, shall I go to the next?
Yes. Continue your set of 6.
Yep. Hard plastic eyes. Okay, this is, I think different tone. The afternoon I first arrived, a newly stamped petty criminal in Mrs. Nolan Lee's living room. She wore a checkered blue pinafore with a white bow. Mrs. Nolan Lee said I would be a gentleman host, then disappeared upstairs for most of the week, with instructions to look presentable and welcome visitors, if any showed. The wages of sin, I guess, for jimmying open a school gym window. Me and a dozen like-minded shirts and skins one rainy Sunday afternoon, when the principal showed up with the police, while other offenders scrubbed walls or picked up trash along the road. Giant green baggies filled with garbage, speared by an 8-penny nail on a broom handle. I sat the second week of December in a room full of dolls no one came to see. Hundreds of them sitting splay-legged on rocking chairs, divans, and sofas, standing with a metal brace up their spine, on windowsills or tucked into bookshelves. The rarest and most favored were confined in large glass cases, floor to ceiling. Porcelain dolls from Mrs. Nolan Lee's childhood, dolls with real human hair and lace-up boots, and eyelids that moved in their antique collars, dresses, velvet, gingham, muslin, silk. Some had their names on folded white cards, others a small tag that gave their birthplace in Stockholm, St. Louis. San Francisco, Berlin, but it was the eyes, frozen and dead, and still watching anyway, that put a mark of guilt on you no matter where you sat. So many unblinking stares, there was no place of refuge in that house, no place to go without being seen. Okay. The next is if you want to understand the weight of lies, just remember the light touch of snow on your face that winter, and stories told so often you actually believe them, told in a cow-eyed sadness, with every muscle taut to the threat of discovery. And when I tried to tell you, no, you wouldn't believe me. So much faith you had in desert flowers and the changes of youth. Now when I see the thickness of years on your body, the abandonment of yourself to the bitterness you've become, I know God has mercy in giving you names to take the place of your own, nightshade and Jimson weed, to keep you from the true ravages of introspection. Okay. And this is a quick one, a little different. The Man Who Shot Hawks. With the Save Sinner front tag and a 20 gauge in the trunk, he drove his gold Mercury 2 hours south to a field he'd baited for quail, and finding the Earth's hunters had arrived as well, great birds drawn there for survival, he shot them down, one by one, for the interloping wings, 6 or so, planted where they fell. God gave man dominion over all the earth, he said then, glorious ignorance personified, oblivious in the way of all hypocrites. Okay. I'm actually reading this in the Kindle version, so it's not like I have Post-it notes stuck on the pages. This is... I could be reading this on my phone, but... Ophelia's dream. Who knows? Sees what? The broken mind beholds. Lost stars and lemon trees. In sleep only she sees the garden transformed. An old Syrian living alone in the desert draws ash from his fire, scratches prayers in the earth with a cypress stick, so the eyes of all dead infants may be returned to God. Okay, and I think River Drowning is my last. And I can sit and enjoy.
As we are now.
I'm trying not to have my Boston accent intrude.
Be yourself, Marianne. Be yourself.
Okay, River Drowning. Come in from the mighty river, Junior Floyd, and dry your clothes, and feed your lungs the light from those stricken seconds just before the sky rolled and bound your head in thunder. Now the banks run 6 feet low, and it's always summer. Some nights I dream the river's you. If you come in from that raging flint, Junior Floyd, we'll talk of grown-up things you never knew. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Marianne. Again, my name is Michael Ingram.
Thank you, Marianne. That was great.
Very nice. Yeah.
Welcome.
What did you learn about yourself, Marianne, from reading those poems? What struck you about those poems that you wanted to choose them?
Well, there's the variety, and I think also I wanted to choose ones. Obviously, they're in a man's voice. I think even separating, but I wanted to choose something. Poems that I could read, and I think, leave some of the others for you all to read. And, I think also what I learned from reading some of the other poems is I think how Clif was able to, there are some terrible things that happen. I think probably the worst thing in the poems that I read were, the hawks being shot down, and I'm kind of an animal lover. But, he recounts it with mercy, and I think that he's not putting them in just, to be shocking and, because he's writing about crazy things, but, it's part of his world.
But I think that as a poet, you really cannot write from any other space but your personal experience, no matter how you see a particular thing, or when you recast it in your own words, it's really far more about you and that moment, and hopefully, and I think Clif is very adept at that, and at showing or drawing the reader into that space, that place, that time. Just by sometimes by word choice alone.
All right. I'd like to read a set of 6 as well. The first is titled View from an Apartment Window. On some warm spring evening, when you are 22 or so, and dusk pushes in through an open window, where curtains swell and billow, and books are stacked and bills are paid, and even the old typewriter seems just possible. And all of this in Baltimore. Now is you. Is it? This is hard to do, because I'm hearing such great things about this man. So it's touching me in ways that I did not expect. So please forgive me as I start over again. View from an apartment window. On some warm spring evening, when you are 22 or so, and dusk pushes in through an open window where curtains swell and billow, and books are stacked and bills are paid, and even an old typewriter seems just possible. And all of this in Baltimore. Now is you. It's as yet inconceivable that one day mortality will mean you too. This is Granddaddy Joe. Granddaddy, sick body smell, dying in the back room where nobody to tell. The self-loathing, hatred, and bone-blind shame, 1,000 crippled memories. A bastard for your name. A razor strop and steel-toed boot. Was that him or you? And Lord knows there'd be plenty to tell if they would only listen and you could only speak. Time is like that. Plodding, intractable as an old cow, chewing away toward oblivion. And if there are words for it, moldering in a ditch somewhere, they were pitched there years ago, and nobody much cares anyhow. The Corner Boys. North Calvert and 25th. These corner boys, hanging quiet on Sunday, like they done found an answer up in here, and can't none of them be seen. All superhero invisible, and shit with that wife beater tee. Low-slung jeans and Jordans, and no more to it than just a nod. So you know they got whatever it is you wanting. Long as you ain't a Walmart hoodie, greasing out the 5-0, a.k.a. Johnny Law, Johnny Popo. So yeah, okay, cool. In the alley right behind the Korean place. Ain't holding but can't have it there in under 10. Because it's the first rule of the hustle. Old and beat. And always, son, keep it neat and discreet and your shit out the street. The woman who played the bass fiddle. A woman who played the bass fiddle strung years into musical riddles. The strangest of words fed to exotic birds, and they sing the whole coot and caboodle. That was kind of funny. I like that one.
Cliff.
Was Cliff part of the limerick?
I like that one. All right. And this is in the grief, the shadows. In grief, the shadows of your face came alive, the bones terrifying and beautiful. I had never seen you this way and tried not to look. Forgive the intrusion, the old man in the hat standing at your door. It was sorrow that brought him there, empty-handed and without words. I think that's my set of 6.
Nice. Right. Good range.
Did I
Those
miss
were
To
important.
Narcissa?
Oh, yes. To Narcissa. Thank you very much. As you can tell, I got emotional and forgot my place. All right. To Narcissa.
Not a problem.
I will not ask you again about things you cannot possibly fathom or scarcely comprehend. Though I suppose you might begin, it would be a start anyway. By looking into the water's clear surface and dropping a stone straight down, see if you can find any depth that way. To Narcissa. I think what I liked about reading that set of 6 poems was, again, the variety, the humor, and the simplicity of them. There were scenes that I could understand growing up in small-town North Carolina, seeing some of the same pictures in my mind, questioning death as I've gotten older, questioning life in general. So again, that's why I chose that particular set of 6.
Great.
All right. Swift Dickerson.
Yes, thank you. This first one is called Vardaman Dreams of Election Day. Who is Fire Bill 30614, Darl? And why do people want to kill him? Does he live in fire, Darl? Is that who he is? And do you have a number 2? There are 5 of them flapping their wings now, saying, family, family, flag, flag, family, flag. Sometimes flag wins and sometimes family, and they all smile God. And the congressman is anti-inflation. Only he's no lady, not the fat lady either, but says he's against New Texas, which is like New Mexico, but says no to Texas. So very soon now, the fat lady will sing Davy Crockett. And if you was to vote, Darl, you could vote for me, I'll bet. So then I could be elect too. And who are the elect, Darl? Who are the elect? Vardaman Dreams of Election Day just struck me with Election Day and Vardaman, and reminded me a lot of Faulkner for some reason. But when
It
I
is
looked,
Faulkner.
yeah,
It's from As I Lay Dying.
Yeah,
Vardaman and Darl.
when I looked up James Vardaman, I was shocked and horrified. So you don't want to go into him. But yeah, it's the Darl from As I Lay Dying. So I had the wrong Vardaman there. At least I was. Willie McTell is the next one, 1898 to 1959. I could smell the rain coming across the fields, and no sound was next. How one thing follows another. Same way you can hear a straight 8, 2 miles down the road, just before the tires are right there about ready to haul you off with that steady hum. Running time through your bones saying, let it be heard. So I left everything behind then, all but the 12-string, one for each apostle, and walked out into a world just now waking up. Those big doors creaking shut, on the cotton houses, dogs barking and horns blowing through the wind off Decatur. All that space in between I knew wasn't empty, because I could hear, even before I touched it, the word living alongside every sound. Willie McTell, if people know, Piedmont blues and ragtime singer who played a 12-string, had a softer voice than some of the blues, and influenced the Allman Brothers and Taj Mahal and Dylan, among others. tribute of sorts there. Very different voice, and I was always amazed at Clif's. I see these poems kind of as visionary poems. You know, he described in the back of the book how he saw the telephone wires as kind of God's guitar or something, you know, strumming away, and he really heard these things, and these voices came out of his past, and this is a voice that out of a different past. The Harvesters at Ypres, from a letter to James Hodge, Hickory, North Carolina, 1924. As I sat this morning drinking coffee and watching Emile's family gather vegetables, I remembered you telling of the nuns at Calais, with their backs bent over dying soldiers, and nothing to be done, really, but to expect a miracle. I see only one so far. You must return soon, mon frère, and see Lazarus brought to the land. Such bounty you cannot believe. Emile will be happy to lend you a shovel. He has an extra after his nephew dug up another jaw in the onion field last week. And this seemed timely as well because of the armistice, the 100-year tribute to the army, the Ypres, the horrible battles there. But what a capturing that moment.
I like the voice you gave to that one.
Yeah,
I did too.
Very nice.
This next Come Home song, 134th and Park, 1920. And then yet another voice. Coleman said how that hophead cornet who'd sweat through to the razor he kept hidden on a string, him and those drummer twins, with them it was always play, pray, and keep your head down low, so most nights his eyes stayed fixed to his own bell, matching each glint off the brass to a single note, spark valve C. Kiss his black ass and percussion be damned. How crazy it was over there. He said people who wouldn't believe that sound took to studying his trumpet so close you'd have thought they was trying to play it with an eye socket, and only two Creoles half understanding what they was saying in the first place. Looking up some nights he couldn't see past the lights, just a sketch of body with maybe a hand flashing out, but knew anyway, all those eyes staring full on. So he remembered the church on Lenox when he was a kid, organs forever, burning saints into the wall, and Coleman said how even now it was like his horn kept reminding him, can't nobody live in that fire too awful long. Come Home song. That's got a history, and I'd like to hear more about that one. But I think when we choose these, we just kind of, something just strikes us about them.
Yes.
Just tropical stillbirth. I have stood in the hollow place where infants are left to the wind, where smoke curls up the color of marrow into a bloodless sky. Nothing is familiar there, but for the dry ground where dreams burrow, and the moon is all night long dripping children into the sea. The wind here is to all things alike, a void where even memory goes once it has taken its first swallow, lying wide-eyed in an empty room at 2 a.m., waiting to be named. Tropical stillbirth. I'll move on to Prayer Beyond Recovery, Maryland, 1985. This sounds a bit more like Clif in a different mode. Jimmy Cheese, torn jeans and summer flannel sleeves. City haunted 2 years for one more fix to bring you steady and standing alone off I-95 in rush hour June, swearing Bronx by the legs of Mickey Mantle and all that ever was holy, how the skag and spike and whole fucking works would be your last wrapped in a white sock, flung far out over Patuxent, free of all temptation. I say you, Jimmy Cheese, jailhouse Jesus tats, and heart big as a child's, come down from that bread truck in North Jersey and bring me back my youth. Prayer Beyond Recovery. And with Jazz Sonnet number 4, Boogie Clark, 1956. I couldn't find anything about the guy, but let's try this. If I could bop like bird or groove like train, couldn't nobody tell me how to step and turn, Stetson cool, I'd shoot through all that pain. free tortured souls and set the rest to burn. An angel of the rooftops brought down by light, I'd cut and wail, peel back the dying streets, a sound that pierced the sky till stars bled raw. The high throne of new creation, my chosen seat. Landlords, politicians, and the repo man, deuce the roll, silk threads and silver-headed cane, and uptown narcs, they'd all be lined up to end on the lowest rods of a screaming West Hell train. If I had Yardbird's hop and Coltrane smooth, wouldn't be no doubt I'd blow the righteous truth. And that's how it sounds, and that's how it goes, and that's the... Can't say it much better than that. Private second class Robert Mueller. I guess you can get an idea of why I tell this, but why I read this. But outside Muncie, 1962, so no virtual connection. Black dirt and creosote he wore when he was a boy, so we looked there first, the cow pen where he climbed the rails and trapped wood beetles in a Rumford can. Tried the flatbed wagon and the grain bin too before Russell found him out there kneeling on the seat just so he could reach the wheel. Why didn't you answer when you heard us calling you, boy? Busy working, buzzing his lip like a motor, so Russell laughed the way he did those days. Look-a there, Daddy, he's all Muller, born to the work. Korea took him when he was 19, place called Daejeon. Now the wheat tops and crows pick the chaff, and each year the sky grows wider, as if it might swallow the whole place, but for the fence line down around the cattle run. Nothing out there but honeysuckle and briars, a little thistle, and come summer, maybe a wasp nest built on the alternator. But I can still smell the oil on it, gasoline too, hard smells, to get rid of no matter how long it sits, tires dry rotting. All the rest gone to rust and weeds, and every broken part on it, like a piece of the land that's always belonged. And a final one here, the Winter Plains. As in a fever then, in the last hours I heard the stirring of horses, and in the distance a song I did not recognize, so that looking down I saw a body, broken and corrupt, and knew at once it was my own. And a voice spoke, saying, do not mourn the absence of generations, nor are you to grieve what is before you, for it is as the husk cast aside, so that sustenance for the body may be freely taken. Go then to serve, all in your presence, humblest to the wisest, to the mightiest in spirit. You cannot know his hunger or his need. Discernment belongs always to one greater than you. Winter Plains. So, thank you. And as I say, we choose according to inclination, and those struck me as if I can relate to the voice or get a sense of how I might appreciate those works, I would select them. And I'm very curious to learn more about them. As I say, I did a little bit of research, but I would never trust the artist anyway. The poem is what speaks, and it's beyond Clif in that respect, but certainly is a wonderful array of voices there that I think he was tapped into for those.
Very nice. Very nice. Miller Newman.
Before I start my actually I have 7 poems, but before I start my 6 poems, I wanted to say that while I have read all of the poems that we've read so far tonight, including the ones that I'm about to read several times, hearing those poems read in someone else's voice, I also hear Clif conveying his own ideas and the reader accepting those ideas, customizing them, and then giving them back to us, just in the cadence sometimes or the word choice. I think everyone has done a marvelous job of opening up the poem individually.
Yeah, thanks. Great.
I'm reading Buck's Table Old guy wore every day of his 60-something years. Scuffed as an old boot heel from all that time running long hauls, he said. One night, we were standing outside Betty's lounge. Would have been 30 years ago at least, and we were passing a joint, back and forth, watching the train disappear while we waited on a game of 8-ball. And he said how if he could just find the right woman, he'd burn everything he owned and start over. Then laughed and freed the smoke on that kudzu trestle, said that what he's been doing most of his life anyway, minus the right woman. Petrilineal question, 1968. Cancer in his bladder and dust on the fields. He died 3 days shy of my 6th birthday. Died on the dull edge of morphine in the front bedroom, just off the screen porch where old men now sat, smoking cigarettes and sweating through their shirt sleeves, leaning forward with elbows on their knees as they revisited the Great Depression, until finally someone thought to bring out an electric fan, one made with salvage parts from the planes he serviced out at the airfield. And the men nodded and said how he could make damn near anything because making was in his hands. Died late in the afternoon on the last Sunday in August, with the sun just starting to settle over 120 acres of soybeans. Then, 3 days later, I stood alone watching the car pull away down that long dirt road toward the highway, that same dust blown into the pecan trees, and the wife of a family friend promising iced tea and sugar cookies if I'd just come back in the house. But the questions were all outside that morning, waiting patiently with their black wings folded high up in the branches. Where would all his stories go now? The secret songs and jokes our mothers wouldn't let us hear? And what would they do with his name, which was also my name? Now he was dead. Let me see here. Line spoken for Clyde Barrow in Dope Sidwell's bar. Now, only Clif would write a poem about somebody in a bar, but we're not going to pass judgment on that. This is Garland, Texas, 1934. There was trouble plenty in that crooked boy's smile, and more than enough meanness once his eyes had narrowed down that long barrel trying to find Christ in the crosshairs, maybe. He was too far gone for reason by then. Too many days turned to a blind wall where nothing breathes nor even belongs to its own skin anymore. Just a rage fast rising to cut its own destruction, like the Brazos down around Brogan come September, or the road through Bienville Parish, grown still but for the buzzing of flies and the far-off hum of a V8 death waiting there in the high grass, patient as Job. The horn player's verse. And a great sky descended, and from it a voice spoke, asking, "Have you come to count yourself among the prophets? For only a prophet may walk here empty-handed and his head uncovered." I answered I did not, and had only this body swollen and worn to give for the taking of a life just lived. And again the voice asked, "Are you then numbered among the people of the desert who subsist only that their song may be each night lifted to heaven?" And again I answered truthfully, "I know only this body, broken and torn, given to you for a life just lived," speaking then in a fear cold as the winter cup through the stones of this very road burned my feet. Leaving house. These things I cannot tell them in their kindness. Our neighbors who stop by the front gate to see what I am planting and ask of you, for whom every bud is an act of enunciation, each tilt of the spade a bright parable for the telling. Theirs are mournful eyes, borrowed from a crucifix. They speak of suffering and wisdom, and bulbs do best this time of year, they say. But I sow my faith in seeds for you so that a year from now, 2 at the most, he said, when the pictures on the mantel have become all strangers to you, and every room a season newly lost, we will sit together here, and you will have dusk and flowers in the hands of a woman unknown to you anymore, and she will tell stories of the moon. You in another season. You in another season where the loveliest of Junes, a perfect line that bore the sun straight down to chlorine light, then surfaced on the blinded afternoon. Time moves slowly in my blood, dreams a woman's body wanting out of the August air. I hear you laughing still as your head tilts back, hands wringing the last of summer from your hair. And before I read the last poem, I want to thank Eileen, Clif's life soulmate, for allowing me to read Sustenance by Participle, because this is an unpublished poem and the last poem that Clif wrote. Sustenance by Participle. Dad's taking hospice in the living room. Oxygen and feeding tubes, motors and compressors grinding. We're on the screen porch, soft summer night, saying our grace, passing around the heaping bowls, and always having loved fried okra and fresh green beans. He dreams, while low voices and clinking spoons pass into a place only he knows, and no one is pretending. Clif Collins, August 2018.
Powerful.
Any final comments as we conclude this evening?
I have a comment. I just wanted to say that we touched on a little bit of this, but I think everyone would agree that when you pick up this book and you read the poems, you sort of want to have your phone next to you so you can look up some things. And what I found was that many of the poems refer to musicians or literary or mythological figures or specific places. And every time I looked up an unfamiliar name or locale, I felt that I was really enriched by a new story or a new song. And so my experience with the book was to savor the poems and not to rush through them. It took me a long time to get through a book of poetry because I wanted to try to figure out as much as I could about some of the poems. And for me, learning about these new things and new places and different times in history was really enriching.
Mm-hmm.
Others?
Well, it's sad.
I want to...
Go ahead, Millie, yeah.
No, you go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, no, I was just saying it's sad because, it's... I'm sure he had some books in him, some more books, but it's also a celebration because this is an extraordinary moment for him to get these out here like this of people who have been in touch with his life in some various ways, and then certainly with the poem. So it's a great program. I think it's moving because he's gone, but I mean it's tremendous to be able to celebrate freshly this work because it's just out really, and I appreciate being a part of that.
What I think is really so telling about this is that Clif has left this legacy of a book of poems that are as relevant to us today as they will be to students in the people in the future and those in the past. And I'm reminded that I very recently donated hundreds of poetry volumes by local poets, national, international poets, to a church bazaar. And it was difficult because many of them were inscribed to give those books away. But then it occurred to me that by doing so, each of those artists, many of them black artists, will be new fodder for people who have not heard poetry written in times of, dare I say, in times of civil unrest, or just do not understand how long poets have written of their own life experiences in an effort to bring it to a wider audience and hopefully make a difference. This is something I think Clif has done quite well, and passing this book and his poems along will go a very long way.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add that it seems to me that he's gotten a lot out of this because I sense that he really was giving a gift to himself as he got through this, and he had a tremendous attitude toward the end. It reminds me of William Carlos Williams' little phrase in which he says, "It is difficult to get the news from poems, yet men die miserably every day for lack of what is found there." And by men, I think he meant women. But no, it's difficult to get the news from poems, yet men die miserably every day for lack of what is found there. It's true. I mean, this is an important thing for our students to recognize that literature is not window dressing. It's the powerful spirit of the human cause in so many ways. It's political, it's spiritual, it's emotional, and certainly literary. And as you say, the allusions are there. It's quite deep.
Yeah, and this show is such a wonderful venue because not only do you get the words, but you hear the voices, and I've really been enjoying listening to everybody else read, and I guess as Mildred said, bringing themselves and taking what Clif had in these poems.
Yeah. Good point.
All right. Well,
send the link. Send the link to your friends and family.
It's a good idea.
Yes, please do so. Please send the link.
And students.
And students as well. And students.
Did you hear, Ethan?
Well, I think it's really important that we keep the tradition of poetry alive. It's yes. Too hard to make it an afterthought. But I sometimes look at poems and realize how skilled a wordsmith one must be to condense a life experience into 3 verses and a couple of stanzas or something. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's a gift. That ain't easy.
No, it's not easy.
Especially to do 18 and 18.
Yeah, exactly.
Has anyone thought of closing the program with one last poem?
Amy, have you read anything tonight?
Well, I haven't read anything, but I think the poem to close with would be one of the cheerful, funny ones, like Benediction or Homecoming, September 1945.
Well, please.
Okay,
please
go for
favor
it.
Us. Yes.
Okay, we can get in Benediction in our last seconds. Benediction.
You're okay.
Overheard at Penn Station, Baltimore. Wipe your face and quit crying. You still got mustard on your chin. We all on the same train, baby. We're just getting off at different places.
I like that.
Great job.
Yeah, that sounds like him.
It's not a morning session, it's a celebration. And I'd like to thank all of you for joining me tonight for this program. This is Michael Ingram with Quintessential Listening Poetry signing off, and to all of you, best wishes. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Take care.
Good
Thank
night.
you.
Thank you.
Right?
Night.
Thanks, Cliff.
Night.
Adios.